Okay, well, guys, welcome to day three, which is our last night for our presentation. So let's go ahead and kind of get started. So tonight we're going to be talking about writing the conclusion and wrapping up with our TOEFL discussion. So we're going to spend a few minutes just reviewing how to finish the body. So again, some of you have done the body exercise from last week. We'll discuss some TOEFL tips, especially about how to write a better body for our essay, and then we'll kind of finish the presentation with conclusions. So we'll give an overview of what the conclusion is, and then specifically talk about our essay topic, because again, the conclusion on the comparison essay is a little bit different from the other kinds of essays that you may see the on the TOEFL. And then finally, we'll wrap up and talk about what we're going to do next. So once again, on the TOEFL, the essay section is referred to as the independent writing section. So they call it the independent task. So remember, on the TOEFL, you've got 30 minutes to prepare, write, and revise a written response. Now, again, we're not focusing on the 30-minute limit here. Our goal is to talk about how to write a good essay. So as we said before, a typical college, a standard college essay has an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. So we started with the introduction a couple of weeks ago. Last week we discussed the body, which we're going to revisit here in just a moment. And then tonight we're going to finish with a conclusion. Now remember our topic. So again, it's the same topic. It's also the topic that you're going to be writing on should you choose to write the essay. So again, this is a comparison essay. So as we will see, the requirements for the comparison essay are a little bit different. Okay, so as we said last week, in writing the body, so again, as we finish the body here in our discussion, remember we mentioned that one paragraph of the essay in the body is going to focus on the advantages of friends who are different, and one's going to refer to the advantages of friends who are similar. Now, some of you have done the exercise in the Google Classroom. So far, it looks like we're getting the basic idea as to how the body works. So as I mentioned last week, the body is the heart of the essay. It's the most important part. So that's why it's so important to make sure we understand how to write the body and what we need to include. So again, tonight we're just reviewing the fact that we need some good examples and details to help us make a good essay, okay? So let's go ahead and kind of look at some ideas. So part of the goal here is to think about, on the TOEFL, we want to demonstrate our full understanding of what the essay is asking us to do. So that brings us to our TOEFL tip for this evening. And this is something I'm going to say over and over again if you continue to want to write your essay, and that is, show me what you're talking about. Don't just tell me. And that's something that's very important. It's a very important piece of advice that writing teachers give many students here in the United States. So in high school, at the university, show me what you're saying. Don't tell me. So in this case, I want you to think about that you can write a good TOEFL essay and give some good reasons for what you believe. But in my opinion, the best TOEFL essays use examples and use details that show the reader we know what we're talking about. So again, that's the idea. That's why in the exercise from last week, I asked you to think about, can you think of an example or a detail from your own life or experience that can show me that you understand what the topic is saying? So again, for example, let's talk about friends who are similar to us. So I'm going to use an example that someone mentioned last week. So I'm going to start here. Here's one reason that someone mentioned in the class. One advantage of having friends who are similar to us is that they can understand how we're feeling without having to explain what is going on. Now, again, I thought that was a pretty good reason. That was one that someone mentioned last week. But the problem is that's not enough. So the question is, what should I do next? When I'm writing a good essay, we want to make sure we don't just make a list of reasons. That's not what the TOEFL wants. The TOEFL doesn't want us just to keep listing things, well, here's one reason, here's another reason. No, they want us to show what we mean. So for example, notice that I included here a way to show a little more detail. So for example, look at what I have here. Whenever I had a problem in the classroom, and this is a kind of like an example for me, especially when I used to teach high school. I could always talk to one of my teacher colleagues who knew exactly what I was going through. For example, one time I needed help teaching a lesson on blah, 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 and my coworker was able to immediately diagnose what I was doing wrong. So notice what I did is I chose a way to get more specific in my writing. So what I want you to notice is when I started with my reason, then I started getting specific with my explanation. Well, here is a way to show what I mean by this. So again, that's why examples, the example here that I used of my teaching experience, helps to emphasize what I'm trying to say. So again, last week in the TOEFL exercise, the few of you who've done the activity so far, you were able to find an example from your life to help emphasize what exactly the reason you're trying to make. Now, of course, the other thing I want to remind everybody, something we mentioned last week, is remember we want to also use good signal words. Signal words help show how we connect information to each idea in the body. So notice, for example, I said whenever I had a problem in the classroom. Yeah, so notice that's still kind of general, but it's becoming more specific. Now it's not just this general idea of friends who are similar, but now I can refer to a specific situation. Well, whenever I was in the classroom. And then notice I get very specific by using, for example, one time. So now I've gotten to a very specific example where a teacher was able to help me with some particular idea. And the reason was because my coworker understood where I was coming from. That coworker basically had the same sort of experience that I was having. Now remember, the TOEFL often uses these kinds of general words like friends who are similar, friends who are different. Remember, you're free to describe or define what does that mean? What does it mean, a friend who is similar? So again, a similar background, a similar experience, a similar profession. You have the opportunity to define that yourself. So that's why I wanted to mention here tonight, just to kind of refresh our memory that in writing a good body to our essay, we need good specific examples, and the more specific we can use some particular example from our lives, I think the better it will be. Okay, now once again, just to kind of conclude discussing the body, remember we generally start with a topic sentence, we go through reasons and examples, and then we eventually finish the paragraph. Now I don't want to confuse you here tonight. The word conclusion that you see here at the bottom means the conclusion to the paragraph, because that's how the body typically works. We typically have in the sort of body paragraph structure, we start from the topic sentence and we get to the finish or conclusion of the paragraph. Now, I wanted to demonstrate. I hope you've had a chance to look through the sample essay that I included. If you remember, the sample essay is the one about cats. So again, I've included the sample essay not only here in our video, but I've also included the sample essay in the classroom. But for example, let me just show you. Remember, the body is the part here. It's paragraphs 2, 3, and 4. But I want to show you how each paragraph starts with that topic sentence. So again, there's that topic sentence in paragraph 2 in the first place, right? People enjoy the companionship of cats. They go through and give some reasons. So for example, cats are affectionate, and then they give us some specific examples. They snuggle up and ask to be petted. Now, of course, this person didn't choose a specific cat. They're kind of using details about cats without necessarily using their own personal life. But it does seem like they understand what cats do, right? But if you notice from the beginning of the paragraph to the end of the paragraph, notice here the person finishes an idea. So here, the final idea, contrary to popular opinion, cats can be trained. Well, again, now the writer is going from the first idea, the companionship, to how cats can be trained how to behave. In the next paragraph, they mentioned in the topic sentence how cats are civilized. They're civilized members. And then the last idea that they mentioned about cats having claws, and then they finish the idea by talking about, well, cats can be declawed. So in this case, that makes them more friendly, or at least easier not to destroy your furniture. So again, what I wanted to just show is that when we write an essay, each paragraph each paragraph needs to kind of start from a logical place, the topic, get through a reason, and of course, maybe two reasons. And then we want to get to the end of the paragraph so that we can prepare to go to the next body paragraph. Okay? So I wanted to just review that here this evening because, again, the body is so important. But of course, I could spend a long time continuing to talk about the writing of the essay. My feeling is if you really want to continue to improve, you have to practice. So that's kind of what I want to encourage everybody to think about. Okay, well, we're here tonight to get to the final idea of our workshop, and that is discussing the conclusion. Now, remember, the conclusion is the final part of the essay. Now, many times students think the conclusion is just, saying that something is finished. But the truth is, on any good college essay, and of course here on the TOEFL, one of the main purposes for the conclusion is to revisit the information that you started with in the introduction and to kind of reference the points that you made in the body. But we don't necessarily want to repeat them. Yeah, we don't want to necessarily repeat everything we've said in the essay. That's not really a conclusion. So in this case, a conclusion kind of tells the reader that, yes, we're at the end of this essay. It's kind of a complete idea. So again, sometimes we think about how long does a conclusion need to be. It doesn't have to be very long. I think a typical conclusion on the TOEFL probably would be around 2 to 4 sentences. So it doesn't have to be as long as the body essay, the body of the essay, because you want to explain yourself more in the body. But a good conclusion will definitely try to go back and revisit the ideas we mentioned from the beginning all the way to the end. Now, I'm going to use here on the screen, I'm going to use the sample essay just to kind of show you how we're able to take the conclusion of the essay. So again, I hope you've had a chance to at least look through the essay, but I'm going to take a moment and look at the conclusion here. So let's take a look at it. So the conclusion says, cats are low maintenance, civilized companions. People who have small living quarters or less time for pet care should appreciate these characteristics of cats. However, many people who have plenty of space and time opt to have a cat because they love the cat personality. In many ways, cats are the ideal house pet. Now, that's the conclusion to the cat essay. But what I want to demonstrate here to you this evening is how this writer was able to connect all of the ideas from the rest of the essay to the conclusion. So let's see again, how did they begin the conclusion? Now, often students want to begin the conclusion with words like finally or in conclusion. In my opinion, that's okay, but the TOEFL usually doesn't want you to use those words. I think a good conclusion doesn't necessarily need to say in conclusion. I think a good conclusion basically just starts with the ideas that are kind of revisiting the ideas in the essay. So if you notice, basically the person is concluding that cats are low maintenance and they're civilized. Now, if you've had a chance to read the essay, you might recognize that some of this is familiar. Well, let's see, where have we seen these words before? Well, for example, if I bring back the introduction and we look at the thesis of this cat essay, notice here, here's the first paragraph now, the introduction, and then notice the part in bold, this is the thesis. So if you notice, they kind of revisit the words that were used in the thesis. So this helps kind of provide sort of a balance, a kind of completeness. From the top of the essay to the bottom of the essay, it feels kind of like, maybe not a circle, but it definitely feels like they're connected. So again, notice there's the word civilized, right? Civilized. Now, of course, they didn't say companions, they said members. That's good. They didn't repeat exactly the same words. And then notice here, maybe some of you can think about, are you a high maintenance person or a low maintenance person? Are you easy to care for? So in this case, notice they didn't say easy to care for. They used the expression low maintenance. So if you notice, this helps to kind of reinforce a connection between the ideas in the thesis all the way to the conclusion. So again, what I'm trying to show you here this evening is that a good writer starts off with an interesting idea, a hook, comes up with a great thesis and gives us things that they're going to explain in the essay. In the essay body, they talk about all of the ideas they introduce. And then finally, in the conclusion, they're able to kind of revisit the ideas they introduced before. So, again, notice how we look through the rest of the conclusion that many of the references that they discussed in the body are also mentioned. So, for example, let's highlight a couple of ideas. Notice it says people who have small living quarters should appreciate these characteristics of cats. And then notice the second part, the cat personality. Well, once again, notice how these characteristics and the cat personality, well, what exactly do they mean by these words? Where did these ideas appear before? Well, again, if we look at the body of the essay, so for example, if we look at the first kind of going through the body, notice the characteristics that are highlighted. So there, for example, these characteristics are highlighted here in that final body paragraph. They get plenty of exercise, right? They should appreciate these characteristics. That idea of less time for pet care. And then notice, what do they mean by the cat personality? Where do they talk about this in the sample essay? Well, again, if I go to the first body paragraph, notice how they talk a lot about their personality. So notice they use the words affectionate and they're playful. So what I'm trying to show you here this evening is that a good writer includes good examples, good reasons, and then in the conclusion, they're able to connect back to the thesis, and they're able to revisit ideas they mentioned earlier in the essay. But notice they don't go back and repeat everything they said. They kind of just provide a quick summary. They summarize this information so that we can remember, oh, that's what they said in the essay. So again, we may not necessarily want to repeat what we're saying before, but we at least want to revisit those ideas. Okay, so far we have identified that the conclusion needs to connect back to the thesis and the body by referencing the ideas. And again, I'm going to, oops, sorry. Excuse me. Well, wait a minute. Okay, so sorry guys. So I want to emphasize once again, right? We want to reference the ideas without repeating them. That's really important, okay? And then, as I said just a moment ago, another important reason, another important purpose of the conclusion is to help summarize the information in the entire essay. So once again, notice how this writer is able to summarize a lot of this essay in a very, very short space in the conclusion. So let me move to the next screen and you'll see exactly what we're talking about. So again, if you notice, this is the conclusion again. Let's look at that last sentence. The very last sentence, notice what they said. In many ways, cats are the ideal house pet. So again, basically what the writer has been doing for this whole essay has been explaining to us, showing us how cats are the best house pet. They're the ideal house pet. This one sentence summarizes all of the information that the writer said in the whole essay. And again, I think to show you just, again, what a good example essay this is, notice how it reflects the thesis statement. Because back in the thesis, they mentioned about what dog lovers, despite what dog lovers may believe, cats make excellent house pets. So once again, notice that kind of balance, how we connect from the introduction all the way to the last sentence. So in this case, it helps to provide that kind of balance. That's really, I think, the idea I want to share with you tonight. The best essays have that kind of balance. Now, of course, our essay, the one that we're writing for our topic, is not a typical explanatory essay. So in going back to our essay topic for just a moment, let's take a look at it. So once again, the construction of a TOEFL essay for the comparison, it's going to be a little bit different for our essay. So if you notice, once again, if we follow the organization of the essay, now the question is, well, what should my conclusion have? what is going to be the conclusion of our essay? So notice I said down here at the bottom, the conclusion will be a little different from what we were talking about a moment ago. And that's because this is a comparison essay, not an explanatory essay. But if you notice, guys, I'm going to highlight here on the screen, this is what the conclusion needs to say. So you spend your time in the essay writing the introduction, writing a good body, but finally, at the conclusion, now we want to know, what kind of friend do you prefer? And in this case, that's where now we're getting to kind of the conclusion of our workshop, which is one of the challenges in writing for the TOEFL is you might feel pressure to say, well, wait a minute, I prefer friends who are different, or I prefer friends who are similar. But the truth is, well, you could be somewhat creative. Again, on the TOEFL, the conclusion to the essay is going to indicate which type of friend you prefer. But remember, you can be creative. Of course, it is possible to state that you prefer both kinds of friends. But if you do, so if you say that, then you need to make sure you kind of reference some of the information you listed in both parts of the essay. Now, guys, I'm really curious here. Let's use the chat box for just a moment, just a real quick kind of survey. So the idea here is, which do you prefer? So using the chat box right now, tell me which one you prefer. Do you prefer the friends who are similar, friends who are different, or do you think you would say both? Okay, so we've got an idea now as to what we think we're going to say in the comparison. So just to kind of, as we get close here to the end of our workshop here, let's kind of review one more time what our essay is going to look like in fitting in the standard essay format. So again, in general, the standard essay format begins with part one, the introduction. So again, we include a hook and we include a thesis. Part two is the body. So the body, of course, is the most important part of the essay. Okay. Okay. And then, of course, today we talked about part three. Now, let's look at our essay format for the comparison essay. So once again, we discussed 3 weeks ago that our thesis is pretty easy. We are going to discuss the advantages of both groups. We're going to look at the advantages of both. And then we're going to give our opinion of which we prefer. Then last week, we talked about the fact that when writing the body, part of the body needs to focus on the advantages of friends who are different, and the other part of the body needs to focus on friends who are similar. Now, I do want to make it clear to everybody. I mentioned that each one is a paragraph. That's not necessarily the case. In fact, some of you maybe are, in terms of writing, maybe you like to write a lot. It's possible that you could include each idea in 2 paragraphs. Students ask me all the time, does the essay have to be only 5 paragraphs or whatever, or 4 paragraphs? And of course, the answer is no, it doesn't have to be. Now, a standard college essay usually has 5 paragraphs. That's kind of what we call the standard college essay. But on the TOEFL, there's no requirement. But I would say that if you're going to write about both ideas, each one needs to be at least in its own paragraph. Okay? And then this evening, we discussed that the conclusion is talking about my preference. And that's really what the conclusion is going to be on the comparison. So when I look at the advantages of both groups, my preference is, and then of course you would state your preference. So again, looks like the majority of us would say both, right? Looking again at the chat box. Okay, so some of you said we want to be a little different, but still, maybe we can see the advantages of both. But of course, guys, the real trick of the TOEFL is the words similar, different. You are free to define those. You're free to create your own sort of ideas as to what those mean. Okay. Okay, well, guys, I really do appreciate you joining me here for these 3 short workshops. And of course, I do want to state that it's pretty hard to get everything in to just about 30 to 45 minutes. Usually when I teach a full TOEFL writing class, it could be anywhere from a few weeks to the whole semester. But here I think I just wanted to make sure that we had some interest, and certainly I want to help anybody who's interested in writing and doing more writing, especially for the TOEFL. So what I want to kind of just finish up with here tonight, and I think this is probably true for everybody in the group, is that probably writing is the thing we probably feel the least confident about in English. From my experience, we have plenty of time to practice listening, speaking, and even reading in our everyday lives. I bet everyone here in this group probably would agree that you spend most of your time speaking, a lot of your time listening, probably some of your time reading, but I really doubt that most of you spend a lot of time writing. And I hate to say this, but text messages, emojis, and Instagram posts are not writing. So in this case, my guess is most of us don't spend a lot of time doing it. In fact, in my experience, most students usually don't feel very confident writing in their own language. And that's because maybe they don't necessarily write a lot in their own language either. So the thing I want to state to everybody here in the group this evening, I want to make sure we understand that if you want to be better in writing, you have to approach it the same way that you would approach speaking, reading, and listening, which is you have to practice it all the time. And in fact, notice it says here that it's the thing that we practice the least. Well, if you're going to be better at writing, it's something you've got to practice all the time. Now, do I have to practice it every day? Well, clearly we want to get better at it. So if you're interested in writing more, my advice would be, yes, you probably should be writing something every day. Maybe writing a little diary, just a journal of what you do every day. That's a good start. But if you're going to write for the TOEFL, you have to practice for it. So that's the kind of thing I want to mention to you. I also want to mention that if you guys are serious about attending a university in the United States, essay writing is an essential skill. It is something that you are going to be required to do. It does not matter what you're going to study. You probably will have to take at least an English composition class. Some of the students who've come from our program, or some of the students that I've helped in the past, whenever they wanted to go to Gateway or any other college here, usually English 101 or a composition class is one of the first classes they're required to take. So I want to mention that to you. Okay, so that's something you guys need to think about. So to kind of conclude when it comes to the TOEFL, I just want to remind everybody that if you want a good score on the TOEFL, and notice we did not talk about scoring in this workshop. As you will see, I will be posting some information about the TOEFL that you can look up on your own. But what I want to say to everybody is that if you want a good score on the TOEFL, good organization and good content, those are the two most important things. Now, students often ask about grammar. Is grammar important on the TOEFL? It's important, but it's not the most important thing. Spelling, again, it's important, but it's not the most important. For example, if you can spell a word and it looks close, the TOEFL will probably accept it. If we have some serious grammar problems, that could be different. But for example, a lot of students often have trouble writing or forget to switch from the past to the present. So for example, a common issue might be switching tenses. Students forget to write in the past tense and keep everything in the present, or often switch tenses and they're not thinking about it. That's pretty much one of the more common issues that students have. So guys, what I'm telling you here tonight is, if you are serious about wanting to continue to prepare for the TOEFL, what I'm going to post in our Google Classroom, I'm going to post the following things. Okay, so on the next slide here, I'm going to show you what are the following things we're going to post. Okay, so on YouTube, I do have a full video series about writing for the task. So a few weeks ago, I shared a little bit of my video, that first video. But guys, writing is a serious topic. So actually, I have a complete series about writing for the TOEFL task, and it is posted on YouTube. I'll also include some links from the Educational Testing Service. So ETS is the official service that has provided the test. And they actually do have some YouTube channels. So they've got TOEFL TV, for example. They often, and of course they're very short. Now my videos are long, okay? So You might want to make sure you have a cup of coffee with my videos. But for the TOEFL ETS videos, they're often very short, and they give you little hints and pieces of advice. So, but again, my only discussion or my only issue with the TOEFL TV is that they're not really designed to take you from the beginning to the end of the process. Uh, in this case, they're just giving you some suggestions or kind of little pieces of advice. But still, I think they're very helpful since they are from ETS. Now, ETS was very nice. Several years ago, they actually shared with us some authentic TOEFL topics. So you can actually see the types of topics that they include on the TOEFL. So again, comparison essays, explanatory essays, defense essays. And like I mentioned 2 weeks ago, the topics themselves are pretty much things that are everyday kinds of topics. Now, they're not topics about, like, what kind of food you like or what's your favorite TV show. They're going to be about university life. But a lot of the people in this group, maybe you've been to the university, or at least some of the issues they're talking about are probably issues that affect everyone. So my advice really is download that TOEFL writing topic document and just spend some time thinking about them. Spend some time talking about the topics. Now, of course, you can get together with friends and talk about anything, and it might seem a little strange to say, hey, let's talk about the advantages of friends who are different and the advantages of friends who are similar. Well, I'm not saying you should do that, but the truth is a lot of these topics are things that you can talk about. So yeah, they're going to be about university life, but they're not extremely academic. The other real advantage of ETS here is they actually, again, when the TOEFL went through its changes back in 2000, I think 2012, um, they actually released some authentic written responses from actual students. And that's really helpful because then you can see exactly what kinds of essays get the particular scores. Now, again, in general on the TOEFL, 5 is the highest writing score. But a 3 is actually a pretty good score too. It's actually kind of in the middle, and most students are, pretty happy if they get a 3 at the beginning. But in this case, you will get a chance to see some authentic written responses and to see how the TOEFL scored them. Okay, well, guys, what's next? Well, again, we're getting to the end of our session. So the first thing I want to state is that I'm not going to include a separate conclusion activity. So I had a week 1 activity and a week 2 activity, but I'm not going to post a week 3 activity. Instead, at this point, so I want everybody to make sure they're paying attention. At this point, if any student wants to write a complete essay from the introduction all the way to the conclusion, what I'm going to do tomorrow morning is I'm going to post a blank document, just like I've done with the introduction and the body, except this Google Doc will be very similar to what you would see on the TOEFL. At the top of the page, I'll have the topic, the comparison topic, and then basically the rest of the document will be yours to type on. So if anybody is interested in writing a complete essay, I will post that information in the Google Classroom, and then you can take time to write the essay. So if you'll notice the last sentence here, it says, when we return for the summer 2020 session, so again in a couple weeks, I will be available to schedule some meetings with those students who have written a complete essay. So I do want to mention that it is not a requirement here for this course that you have to write an essay, but I know some of you have gotten excited or started writing complete essays already. So all I want to say to everybody is, and I want to make this clear, if you want to write an essay, you don't have to do the other activities. So if you want to try writing a complete essay and you didn't do the other activities, that's perfectly fine. But I'm going to post that doc in the classroom tomorrow morning, and basically you'll have about 2 or 3 weeks if you want to write it. If you turn it in, I'll read it, and then of course I'll try to schedule a meeting with you during the summer session so that we can talk about it, and maybe you can get a chance to rewrite it. Okay? Okay, well, everybody, I want to thank you so much for participating in the workshop.